Good morning. Namaste. Welcome to Heartset Mindset Reset. I'm so excited to be here with everyone today. My name is Jacqueline Way. I am the founder of 365 Give, and I also sit on the board of advisors for Humanity's Team. And we are so excited to have everybody coming into the live stream today, whether you're coming in from Facebook Live, YouTube Live, or here on Humanity Stream. We're excited to have you with us today. And, we're really here to celebrate a lot today because yesterday happened to be World Happiness Day. And so we are continuing our conversations around happiness. And we've got an amazing guest I can't wait for you all to meet today. But we're just going to start today's show with letting you know what Mindset Heartset Reset is all about. And then I'm going to introduce my co-host today. So welcome everyone as you're coming in and welcome to today's show. Mindset Heartset Reset is really our own dynamic weekly show that we like to provoke introspection on your own life. We cultivate compassion and spark positive change, both in yourself and globally. Through our insightful discussions and guests, we're going to give you practical tools based on authentic real life stories that are going to nurture and empower your own mindset, open your heart to connections, and give you the courage to hit that reset button on your own life. Our mission is simple. We're here to expand love at a global scale with a vision to shift humanity's future into one that we can all thrive. So I'm excited to get started today. We don't want to miss a minute about happiness because what we know about happiness is it's really a moment by moment experience. So I am going to get started by introducing my co-host, the beautiful, remarkable, and brilliant Dr. Roshanak. Okay, hold on. I have to go back. I got to start all over.
This is our first
I need to do my
together.
O's. Exactly. Dr. Roshanak Hashimoon. And yes, and happy Nowruz to everyone today, including my beautiful host. So happy Nowruz to you, my friend. Dr. Roshanak, as we so fondly call her, is a credentialed computational, clinical, and behavioral neuroscientist whose work has supported and transformed countless lives. She continues to do it every day. She is the founder of the Access to the Path, and she combines the power and process of science with emotional and spiritual intelligence to generate compelling and innovative strategies that help people and businesses become more purposeful, effective, and prosperous. Dr. Roshanak, sorry I tripped over your name this morning. That was a good way to start the show. Welcome to World Happiness Day. Welcome to happiness here together today. I'm so happy to be with you. And over to you to introduce what we're up to today and our guest.
Yay. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, my lovely co-host. We've been together for years. We have done an endless number of shows and events and everything together. And so I just have to laugh because this is the fun of life, isn't it? Isn't this the joy of life where we can enjoy, even when we're on a live show, when we trip over things rather than getting stuck and miserable and, oh my God, what are people going to think? We could just laugh and have fun because you know what? It's not the end of the world. And actually, it is really fun to not have everything go exactly as planned, right? To not have everything go exactly as planned. We can get miserable about things because, oh my God, if it goes according to plan, then it'll be okay. Who decided everything's going to be perfect if it goes according to plan? Who?
Yeah, let's talk about perfect, right? Like, what is perfect?
It could be perfect no matter what. And why do I bring that up? Because so many people equate happiness with perfection, and because they think that makes them worthy. And so they procrastinate their happiness, but not today. Today, we are really focusing on not procrastinating our happiness. So welcome everybody to Mindset Heartset Reset. So excited you could join us if you're with us live or if you're with us at the recording time. After with the recording, there you go. We're going to trip up. And so we are doing, as Jacqueline has said, our series on happiness. So we're doing increasing happiness. This is the third in our series, and we're super excited to have the marvelous Dr. Elia Gourgouris join us. We'll go to him in just a moment. And today, the topic of our show is the portal to happiness. And the most important thing that we're going to talk about is how not to procrastinate our happiness and all the different ways, the gateways, or the portals that exist for us to get to happiness and to have a happiness that is absolutely sustainable. And that's what we want. And there's so many different ways that we can describe happiness. We're going to dive into that a little bit too. But mostly we're going to talk about the connection of self-awareness, of emotional intelligence, of the understanding that when you have setbacks or challenges, that's not the time to lean back and lean out, but how you can lean in to make sure that you can stay in that beautiful state of happiness and of joy, to have the clarity that comes in and gives you the power that you have been most likely giving away looking for scraps of control, which, by the way, is an illusion. So we have a lot to talk about. Dr. Elia is fantastic. I'm going to read to you this one sentence. If you haven't read our copy, I invite you to do so. That I think is so important, that Dr. Elia has a clear objective, and that is to provide a path that releases suffering and offers the opportunity for healing, redirecting us to start our lives with joy and purpose. If you haven't gotten there yet, I'm so excited that you're here now, so we can give you a little boost to get there. So our fabulous guest is, in fact, Dr. Elia Gourgouris, and I'll give you a little short bio on him before we get started. Dr. Elia is the president of the Happiness Center. He's also called the Happiness Doctor. The Happiness Center is an organization of world-leading experts in the field of positive psychology. He is also the founding partner of the Global Institute of Thought Leadership. His work is related to personal success and happiness. The Global Institute for Thought Leadership is an organization that brings together best-selling authors, world-renowned speakers, industry experts, and pioneering thinkers who all share a common goal. We're just going to trip over ourselves today and laugh all the way through. Who all share a common goal, which is changing the world of ideas. Very important, because as we change our ideas, we change everything else, including our expectations, and with that, our levels of joy and happiness. Dr. Elia is the author of the #1 best-selling Amazon book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, which has been translated in 5 languages, including Greek. He co-authored the highly acclaimed book, 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. Boy, could we use that right now. A practical guide to emotionally dealing with pandemics and other disasters. I recommend this book.
That was a big one during COVID. It was huge.
We really, this is
needed it.
This is going to be something that we should come back to now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
His message is featured in respected publications and media around the world. With his positive psychology background, he has helped thousands of people, both in their careers and in their relationships, to achieve success and better work-life balance. As a keynote speaker, he frequently presents at international conferences and universities, focusing on corporate wellness, mental health, positive leadership, building trust and loyalty, and resilience. He's also the executive producer and co-host of the new reality TV show, The Kindness Factor. Dr. Elia was born and raised in Athens, Greece, where he became a national swim champion. Go back here. He moved with his family to Santa Monica, California when he was 10. He received his BA in psychology from UCLA and then went on to receive his master's and PhD in clinical psychology. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you with us, Dr. Elia, on Mindset, Heartset, Reset. What a joy, what a pleasure. Namaste.
I'm so grateful to be here. And I really like, when you made the introduction before, Jacqueline, when you were talking, you used the word provocative. So this show is provocative. So I like provocative. We're going to have a provocative conversation.
We're provoking people today. And that's the way to happiness.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing like being a little provocative to promote a little happiness. And, I love this whole thought. And Dr. Roshanak, when you were, introducing our title today of the show, The Portal to Happiness, just imagining that we could just take that one step forward in our life and we step into this new portal. And my kids are gamers in the Roblox world, and they step through portals all the time, and I just had this vision of us stepping through this portal of happiness, and in one step we're through to the other side. So I'm excited for all of this today.
In all seriousness, the word provocative evokes this image in my mind. When you're provocative, you have to go outside of your comfort zone.
That's true.
Right.
And tell us, let's just
I was going to ask you if you were going to keep this clean for the show today too.
Let's run with that. So
we
saying
we can flirt with all kinds of ratings. We can flirt all the but if you think about it,
help me, people, help me.
Yeah. Is it not true that when we are provocative in our thoughts or in we bust the comfort zone, we go outside of the comfort zone, and really, isn't this where true growth happens? I mean, the
Yes.
comfort zone is comfortable and it's nice, and we all like it. That's why we call it the comfort zone. But nobody ever truly grew, either spiritually or emotionally or mentally or their career and so on, until they stepped outside of their comfort zone and risked, perhaps, maybe a calculated risk, but took a chance on doing something far bigger than they were comfortable with. So that's provocative. There you go.
So I'm going to, if you don't mind, ask you a question that's related to this. And that is, I want to like ask a question, connect the dots. So we're talking about portals to happiness. And now we're talking about getting out of our comfort zone. Most people don't equate being uncomfortable with being happy. So let's connect the dots of how growth, which is what happens from us facing our challenges, connects us to, or is a portal to, or a gateway to happiness. I know one of your favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela: in life, either you win or you learn.
Exactly.
And how this is very important for us when, let's look at it from the other side, when one of the things that might prevent us, we believe, from being happy is when we quote unquote don't win, or what we might call lose or fail, a word that I'm not a big fan of. And so we think, I can't be happy because I failed, because I fell, because I lost, because I didn't win, because I'm uncomfortable, because I have to put effort into this, because I'm challenged. Can you please speak to us about how we might move into that space and appreciate how it supports us and learn how we gain tremendous sustainable happiness and joy from that?
I would love to.
Thank you.
So,
Just let's start off easy.
yeah. First of all, not just the three of us on this screen, but everybody listening and everybody in this entire planet, we're all graduates from the same place, which is what I call the University of Adversity. There's no one that's not hasn't graduated from the University of Adversity. And the older you get, the higher the degree because you've experienced more of life. Meaning that you've lost loved one. Initially, you start losing, your grandparents, and at some point you lose your parents, and at some point you lose, God
A pet.
forbid, pets. You lose your maybe
You lose a job, you
A
lose so
friend.
many
When
things,
we're
a
little, we
house,
have
a
our
friend,
best
right?
friend. Maybe we move away or something
yeah,
happens.
and there's financial stressors. There's being out of job. There's difficulties. There's divorce. There's difficulties, and God forbid, sometimes you even lose a child. You lose your spouse. You lose. So you get sick. You have cancer. I mean, you have all kinds of things. So the adversity. And the 7 keys to navigating a crisis. We're not in a crisis right now per se, but I would say, what are the 7 keys to navigating?
I think we might be.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And I both like,
but there's not always a crisis, but there are always challenges in life.
Yeah.
And going back to Nelson Mandela, who said, obviously, in life, either you win or you learn. We've all accomplished certain things in life, and we can be proud of, and so on, and that's good. But the greatest lessons I personally have ever learned have come from what appeared at the time to be setbacks. Now, the key, of course, is while you're going through them, can you see can you be grateful for them while you're going through the adversity? Because typically what happens, you go through it, you achieve something else, then you look back to your past and you reflect back and say, if that door hadn't closed, this door wouldn't have opened, right? It's always easier to see it when we're on the other side, which is fine. And at least it's good to acknowledge that. But could we be grateful while we're going through the struggles? And it's very common for human beings to, especially when life is difficult, to kind of fall into the victim mode, which is basically why is this happening to me? But what if we were to change that and say, why is this happening for me? In other words, the universe, God, the powers that be, the light, the source, what if everything that's happening is happening for my own good? Not to me, poor me, which gets down and depressed. But what if we change that one word? It would change everything in our outlook, at least, of how we see what are perceived at the time to be setbacks.
Amen.
I would like to share a personal story for a moment that just came up when you said that. I'm going to try to compose myself because as I think about it, it starts to break my heart. I was in the hospital with my mom. She was very sick and she passed away. And during the time that she was sick, and it all happened very quickly, the why me thing, because I was young when this happened, definitely set in. And there was a lady, beautiful lady, Patty Fardi, who was very helpful and supportive. And she gave me a little recording of a young woman who had lost her sight. She was sighted and then she lost her sight. And she goes around the world speaking of why me. And she says, you never think, why me? I have sight. You think, why me? Did I lose my sight? You never think, why me? When you have the gifts and blessings that you have. Why am I so blessed? You want to talk about getting happy? Why am I so blessed? I have my eyes, I have my ears, I have my full stomach, my friends, my health, my fingers, my toe, whatever it is you have. And this is when we talk about the attitude of gratitude, but truly, you are so blessed and you never think, why me? But as soon as you feel that you've lost a blessing and you don't know what blessings are showering down on you through what you perceive as a loss, but it's really a change, then you fall into this despondency and ingratitude and pain and suffering. Whereas if you keep your focus, I'm not saying that we should deny things, but perhaps if we can understand how to modulate, then that why me, for example, is another way of thinking, I'm so blessed. And isn't that a gateway to deep and profound joy? So I thought that was very powerful when I listened to this young woman who was speaking of her perception, of her experience of losing her sight as a young woman.
Well, and this may lead to my question too this morning that I had, because, and I've heard you both say these words. We're talking about happiness, and then we're also talking about joy. Dr. Elia, can you talk to us about your understanding, your perception of, what actually is happiness, and then what's joy? And is there even a difference between the two?
I think there is a difference between the two. And, we talked a little bit about perfectionism earlier on. And I happen to be a recovering perfectionist. So if there was a 12-step program out there, yeah.
I was going to say, Dr. Roshnak still is. She's still
I'm serious now. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And, for the longest time, the doctor, the psychologist, everybody comes to me for answer. I had to be perfect, and so on. And it caused so much stress in my life. It almost killed me. And you know what the biggest fear was?
No, it's true though, right?
Letting go of the perfectionism. The biggest fear is that somehow my performance, let's say, would suffer. The opposite happened. Because when I let go of the perfectionism, I was able to look at myself and laugh even, at my imperfections and so on, and even embrace them. And I actually became happier because the pressure wasn't there. So happiness and joy, I think there are perfect moments in life. There's some perfect moments, like a sunset in Santorini in Greece or in Maui or whatever. The perfect moment, the perfect sunset.
We're being on Mindset Heartset Reset together.
This is a perfect moment. Absolutely.
It's a perfect moment.
It's a perfect moment. But, perfect moments don't last forever. And
Nothing does.
On a personal level, I remember when I was a young man and a swimmer, I was swimming in California, and there was the Golden State, which is California is known as, championships. And I swam in 6 races, 4 individual and 2 relays, and I won gold medals in all 6. It was the perfect meet. And I was a teenager at the time, and somehow I realized that this may never happen again. In other words, I may never have a swimming meet where I win every race, break every record, right? And it never happened again. But for that golden weekend, if you will, that was a perfect swimming event for me, right? Never happened again. So I treasured it. So we have perfect moments, but there are no perfect people. There's no perfection per se. We can have, and when those events happen, that is truly joyful because they're rare in a lot of ways. But happiness is something else. In the book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, there was a huge debate about the title. I got a lot of pushback, like, you should just call it 7 Paths to Happiness. It's catchy, pop psychology, easy. And I'm like, I'm not interested in something light. I'm talking about lasting happiness. And I pushed back
Mm.
and I got my way in the end. Lasting happiness is what matters. Long-term, consistent, in spite of the adversities that we face, right? And the trials and tribulations, which we all face and we must face. And you talked about gratitude before, having an attitude of gratitude. That's the easiest thing in the world when everything's going well.
Right. That's right. That's
Try
right.
to be grateful when you're going through the adversities, and that's the extra homework. If you can do that, you live a pretty golden life. Because, doctor, you know this from a medical perspective. You cannot be in a grateful state and be depressed at the same time, physiologically. You can speak to that. It's impossible.
That's right. And I think maybe this idea of why me is a good way to work on that attitude. So if you and honestly, I have this. I got my patootie kicked so many times when this is when I was in, I believe I was in college, or maybe I was in grad school, and things were going not well, and I was really upset, and I was not grateful, and I did the usual. Well, it can't get any worse than this. I was so angry and
Actually,
upset.
it can. Anytime we say that, I'm afraid that it can get
Oh
worse.
yes. Oh yes. That's exactly right. That is exactly what I'm about to say. So I was
You
like,
called it in.
I had that attitude of ingratitude. And why should I be grateful? I mean, for goodness sake, it's not getting any worse than this. This is as bad as it gets. Well, do not tempt fate or God. From my perspective, God was like, really? Let me show you something.
Right.
And
It
to
can get
keep
so
it
much worse.
short, right. And to keep it short, this happened for cycles. Like every time it got worse, I was like, fine, well, now it really can't get worse than this. And God's like, ha, 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 watch this, And so it got to the point where I was like, okay, uncle, I give up. And I started with whatever I could find to be grateful for when I was like 6 layers below what I thought was rock bottom. And slowly but surely, having something to find to be grateful for pulled me up and got me into a habit, very important, of being grateful no matter what.
No matter
And
what.
then as I went on in my career and with, my parents' illness and, being in the hospitals, every day I would walk into my job at the hospital and pass through people who had, real physical issues, real health challenges. And it reminded me every single day to be grateful for what I have. And as I was taking care of my dad for many, many years while he was sick and what I went through with my family, I learned that any day that you can breathe your own air, take your own shower, or take yourself to the restroom is a great day. Just imagine not being able to do one of those things. Just imagine having shortness of breath, not being able to get your oxygen, which we can all now relate to a little better after COVID. So when you think it's so bad, then one way could be to say that why me in the way of the blessings that you have, but also consider just the basics that it could be so much worse than what it is now. And physiologically, neurobiologically, that's very helpful for us to change how our brain regions and connections function that start to pull us out of that state, if it's a chronic stress in particular, of, for example, learned helplessness. There's a neurobiology to this. And then, as you know, from studying positive psychology, Dr. Seligman, who first came up with learned helplessness, decades later said, oh, science has caught up. And it's not just an attitude. It has to do with your behavior, how, what you're doing, because the brain can detect control. And then there are changes that release the anxiety and the, feeling of I can't do anything and immobilization and so on and so forth. So when we are at that rock bottom, just remember how I thought, oh, it can't get any worse.
Our first strategy and tool
Yeah.
for the day: every time you go to the potty today, be grateful.
Honest to God, I do that.
And that would be the perfect
works.
little
Yay.
practice. Oh, right. I get to sit
It all
on a
works.
potty.
I'm going to the bathroom. So happy.
Excuse me. I'm
I am
sorry.
so happy.
Oh.
I'm like,
But that's
it's
we're going to
functioning.
plant these little triggers in everybody
true,
today
though,
as we
but
go
isn't it
along,
true?
right? It's like,
But I've
yeah,
seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen how people suffer, and that's why I'm not getting into it, but I've seen how people suffer, which is why it is very real,
Right.
and if you don't believe it, imagine what would happen if you couldn't. If you
Right.
needed
So
someone,
many
literally.
people in the world, right? Or so many people in the world that don't actually have a potty, right? A flushable
Yeah.
toilet that they get to sit
Yeah, even
in
that.
privacy, right? There are millions of
It's
people,
true.
refugees, people all over the world right now. When we say there's no crisis, there is a crisis, and all of those people do not have a private potty to sit on right
Well,
now.
in Gaza right
So
now,
go
hundreds
give
are
that
sharing
potty a
one
hug of
toilet,
yours today, right? Yeah.
right? So yeah, so just having the like the bed to sleep in or a roof over your head, or even not, when you have the ability. I know I saw it with my own eyes when a gentleman, a very refined man, because of physical ailments, couldn't and had to wait. And so it really makes a difference when you recognize, like, I imagine sometimes when I'm really foul, I go, well, how would I feel if, like, I had a cast on my foot or my hand? And then I go, well, I'm really happy, because that's how your brain works. It's in comparison, right? So what is wrong? What is my challenge? What is the resistance? And then when you get relief from that resistance, you could just imagine that and get that relief and move into it. But it's very truthful. You are the why me, blessed with all that you have. Right?
Indeed.
So, Dr. Elia, I have a question for you. Would you please talk to us a little bit about, now that we've talked about how we're learning to appreciate things, can you talk to us a little bit about self-awareness? Because this is very much related to what we're talking about, and perhaps a bit about emotional intelligence, and how self-reflection, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence are really also gateways to our happiness.
Absolutely. As you mentioned earlier, I am Greek, so I was born in Athens, and but where our family home is very close to Delphi, which is in the ancient times was considered to be the center of the world, and this is where generals and kings and so on will trek up the mountain to Delphi, to the temple of Apollo, to speak to the high priestess, who would prophesy. It would prophesy, so they go to war, and like the oracle was never wrong. Let's just put it that way. She always answered in a mystical way. So no matter what the outcome would be, the oracle would be right. But to this day, as you enter the temple of Apollo, there's an inscription at the top with two words: "Know thyself." That's 2,500 years ago. So part of it is that we need to actually invest, and we have to get quiet, by the way, and invest in ourselves and say, first of all, what do I truly want? Not what my parents wanted for me, or what my significant other wants for me, or my boss wants for me. What do I truly want? Where is my heart set? Which I love, because mindset is important. We all know that. But if it's not in alignment with your heart set, we're going to be in trouble. So I really love it. Just the name of your podcast is the most beautiful name: Mindset, Heart Set, and then Reset as a result of that. So that part of self-discovery is beautiful. When the pandemic hit, and I didn't have a Greek passport for like 30, 40 years. For some reason, I finally got one in 2019. And as a result of that, I was able to travel to Greece by myself without any family or whatever for 7 weeks. I needed to get out of the US, honestly. And I did so much self-reflection, something that I had never done before in my life, honestly. And I spent 7 weeks. And people say, well, what'd you do for 7 weeks out there? I'm like, I swam like twice a day and got totally bronzed. The sunlight, great Mediterranean diet, the best food in the world, the healthiest food in the world. I walk to the bakery every day. I walk to no car, just walking, being close to nature, which is that's a big part of our happiness, by the way, spending time in nature as much as we can. And for 49 nights, I ate out every night, and I never ate alone. So social connectivity, just to give you an idea, can you imagine 49 nights? Some nights I was double booked, seriously. And we laughed, we had deep and profound conversations, and more importantly, we connected. And as I was flying back to the US, I reflected upon my time there. I'm like, you know what? I forgot that there's another life. It shouldn't be just work, 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 work. The quality of life has a lot to do with the relationships that you have in your life, and the social connectivity was huge. So I made a conscious decision, mindfully, and I want to be spending 4 or 5 months a year now in Greece, and I have for the last couple of years, and it has really balanced and integrated life in such a beautiful way. So And that to me is, at least for me personally, that's lasting happiness. So, and relationships are a key part of that. What's really important is, and I made this decision consciously, probably close to 20 years ago. I made a conscious decision to, although I do practice self-care and self-forgiveness and gratitude and all the things that are important for, and I know what my purpose in life is, and which is to leave this world a better place than I found it, much like the two of you. I realized that you can do all the self-care in the world, be self-actualized, do all those things. But if you surround yourself by toxic people, it will rob you of your health and your happiness. So I made a conscious decision. You know what? I don't want any more toxic people or relationship in my life, and I have eliminated them. People really doubt me. I do a lot of interview. People are you serious? Are you telling the truth? I'm like, I'm dead serious. And then they're like, well, what if it's a member of your family? I'm like, especially if it's a member of your family.
Me
Exactly. I
too.
agree with
Yeah.
you. Hello. And
Right.
of course, then they go, well, how do you do that? I said, you know what? It's not as hard as people think. Eliminating toxic relations for your life is actually fairly easy. It takes a little bit of practice the first couple of times that you do it. But and I'm going to practice it. I'm going to take Jacqueline. It
Because
matters.
I'm really toxic.
I know, no. I'm just saying that in our relationship, do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect? It always has to do with how we show up with people in that relationship, first and foremost. So let me ask you that. Do I show up with love, kindness, and respect towards you?
Always.
Okay. Then I have every right to expect that you treat me with love, kindness, and respect in return. That's not a big ask. As long as I'm showing up, I'm not a jerk, and I'm showing up lovingly, kindly, and respectfully, I have every right to expect that. So if somebody doesn't treat you with love, kindness, and respect, but you show up that way, that's when you have what I would call a hot conversation, HOT, honest, open, and transparent. And the conversation is,
That's great.
Jacqueline, you and I both agree that I treat you this way consistently. I expect the same in return. And if you can't do that for whatever reason, and I don't really care about your reasoning. I'm having a bad day. But you know what? I don't really care the reasons why, because no matter what, I still treat you with love, kindness, and respect, no matter how good or bad day I'm having. So if you can't have that, then you and I are not going to have a relationship, or at best, we will have a very, very superficial relationship. We'll see you at Thanksgiving, at a family dinner, whatever. And it can be, how's the weather? How's this? It will be very superficial. If you and I have a deep relationship with me, I care about you. I assume you care about me, and we want to have a deeper relationship. Something has to change. And if you don't change, I'm going to cut you out of my life. And I'm saying this with love, but I mean it. I think most people, when they are on the receiving end of that conversation, at least in my experience, they have stepped up. And for those that don't, well, that's their choice. And I have to they make my choice accordingly. And there you go. And therefore, we don't need to have toxic relationships in our lives. But it matters how we show up. I can't be a jerk to you and expect you to be kind, loving. I mean, that doesn't work that way. It starts with the man and the woman in the mirror. I got to show up a certain way, then I have every right to expect that in return.
You know, it's funny because we expect so much from other people, but we don't pay so much attention to how we're showing up. And I love that you said that. It's very important. If if you want them, even if you're of your own life, you demand so much of life, but what are you demanding of yourself? What are you bringing to life when you want so much to receive from life? Right.
Right.
We're not in siloed, vacuums.
You know what? I'd like to, Elia, bring this up as well with you, just because I think this reflects back on our happiness as well. And I've talked about this often, but during COVID, when I was home with my family, it was such a reflection for me that if I wasn't happy, I like to call myself my chief happiness officer at home. I know when I'm not happy at home, it affects everybody in my family, right? It
Yeah, when
affects my
mom's not happy,
children.
nobody's happy.
Right, completely and totally. And so it goes both ways. So I realized, especially over that time, it was like the hammer over the head saying, I have to show up. This isn't just like I'm going to put a smile on my face and pretend that I'm happy, because, how do you feel about the vibration of happiness? Like, do we feel that that's even a thing? Can people feel this from us, the true nature of it, versus that here, I'm going to put a smile on my face and I'm just going to pretend that everything's okay. how do we deal with those two sides of ourselves and step more into our true happiness versus the pretend happiness?
Happiness, first of all, is beautiful and it's sexy. People are attracted. No, I'm serious though. I mean, we can be provocative
I
here.
love these words today, provocative and sexy.
If you think about it,
We're talking about a new side of happiness. I'm liking it.
aren't we attracted to people that exude that authentically, though, not with this fake smile, like you said, Jackie, but authentically exude this positivity, this light from within, where they glow, right? And we see that they're glowing, and they become beautiful and sexy as a result of that. It has nothing to do with looks. Yes, it's more to do about the energy that they exhibit, and we want to be around them. Why do we want to be around them? Because they're drinking some kind of Kool-Aid, and I want some of that, whatever that is, Right.
It was perfect. I was sitting, y'all couldn't see this, but I was sitting there cheers. Dr. Ellie, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid
But isn't it true though? Think about it. Think about the people that were most attracted. Like they have something magnetic, the X factor, whatever you want to call it. There's something about like, wow, I like being when they walk into the room. It's the happiness factor, exactly.
That's called the H factor.
There you go. A new book coming, I can see. The eighth path.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. And I agree. And so let's talk about, one of the things we want to make sure people walk away today with. And this is something that's really important to me. Dr. Roshanak and I talk about this in many aspects that when we talk to our guests, but it's the practice of happiness. And this is something that I learned, my story about 365 Give. I did one thing to give back to the world every day for 365 days with my son when he was 3, for the sole purpose that I knew that giving back would increase his personal happiness. And I wanted him to have a happy childhood. And so that's why I did this. And so I've learned a lot about this practice of happiness. Can you talk to us about practicing happiness every day, the ways that we can do this, some of the tools and the strategies, things that people could take away today? Because some people are like, I don't even know where to start, let alone a practice. And why do I practice happiness?
Well, first of all, I think happiness begins with self-care. I don't know anybody who neglects themselves on a physical, emotional, mental, or spiritual level and that are happy. And like you guys know thousands, and I've worked with thousands of people. When people put themselves first in terms of self-care, and the pushback sometimes like self-care, that sounds like you're being selfish. Is it?
Right.
Or is it an investment in yourself as you practice self-care physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually? Then your own batteries are full. And the best version of ourselves now is walking around on this beautiful planet of ours. And when the best version of ourselves happens, we elevate other people.
That's right.
We help other people because our batteries are full. We do practice acts of kindness and acts of service, not random, but conscious acts of kindness and service. And because we're in a really good place. Happy people by nature do that anyway. It just comes automatic to help other people. On the flip side,
that's proven by science. The happier you are, the more generous you are, right? So I always say that. What comes first? Generosity and giving, or happiness? But it's actually a beautiful full circle.
Exactly, because when you do practice acts of kindness, what happens to our brain, Dr. Roshanak? I mean, what's physically, what happens to us when that happens? Something happens to our brains.
Absolutely. In fact, it happens to our whole body. So we can look at emotional. What our emotions look like in our bodies, and we can see areas of the brain and body or the face that are more activated or less activated. And we know even from the very simple thing, like when we go into distress and we go into fight or flight, right? This high activation of the nervous system that comes from the sympathetic branch taking over, as it were. And when we can do something very simple like breathing,
Even regulating our breathing, absolutely.
Right. So, and that activates the vagus nerve, that activates more parasympathetic tone. And when we're happy, happiness is like love in the presence of the body. And we see in the body maps, this lighting up of literally almost the entire body. In some areas, and you see this in particular, that is so brightly activated. We do a color coding that it comes out white.
Wow, interesting. I didn't know. Wow.
Yeah. So you can see like depression, how it has the body into the cooler, colder. It's a deactivation versus an activation. But then there are different kinds of activation, like your stress. That's distress is an activation that has you in a contracted rather than an expansive. You know, we would say it would be an unhealthy rather than a healthy activation, right? So we can be activated with love and joy, and we're like, right,
Open, right? Then you can
right.
feel open.
And
Yeah.
our bodies show that, and the brain recognizes muscle patterns. So if you do this, the brain recognizes that when these muscles are contracting, that means joy almost always. That means happiness. And so your body is telling your brain, I'm in a good state. And vice versa, if you can convince yourself that you're in a bad state by repeating over and over, oh, this day is awful, oh, I feel bad, oh, blah blah blah, and then your body responds. So it starts with something. But remember when I talked about modulation earlier, you can emphasize or de-emphasize that something, because we say brain and body, but the brain is obviously in your body. It's just the central servo. There's a constant communication. And as you were saying earlier, Dr. Elia, we cannot underestimate or in any way, shape, or form undermine the importance of protection and taking care of this mortal coil of this physical vehicle. So when we're talking about happiness, we can actually put ourselves into a happy emotional state. A little bit different than what Jacqueline was saying when she was asking about joy versus happiness. That comes from doing that constant work and the habits that bring you into that natural sort of almost what's known as a dispositional or a trait, right? And we know that genetically happiness is conferred to us through our genes, but there's epigenetics that have circumstances expressing or not expressing certain genes. So it's very important that we consider how much control we have over our own states.
Actually, quite a bit of control.
Quite
Well,
a
it
bit.
does when you think about it from especially the physical perspective, right, Dr.
Right.
Elia? Because now all of a sudden we think, okay, well, we've got to change our mind, or we've got to, look at life differently. But we can actually use this body of ours
Absolutely.
as this
Leverage.
opportunity, right? It's like, it's your tool, right? How can I use my body, do all the things that Dr. Roshanak just said, and, turn on our happiness every day?
I have a question for you, Dr. Elia, that's very
Sure.
related to this, that's related to an experience you shared with us. So I just talked about how we can speak. And so this is sort of connected to the idea of manifestation. But as I always say, I do the science behind the woo-woo, right? So how do we sort of speak things into being? How do we create for ourselves, let's say, our state of being? You had an experience where you then said to a friend, and it kept coming to you over and over and over again, I love you, I'm so proud of you. And that became a feedback loop to yourself. I'd love it if you would share what happened to you when that happened.
Yeah, I had a beautiful transformative, I would say, and spiritual experience with medicine. And the facilitator, she's one of the preeminent people in doing trauma work in the United States. And I've referred a whole bunch of people to her, and my own family included. And I finally said, you know what? You're sending everybody else here. Why don't you give this as a gift to yourself? Just go and see it, and you be on the receiving end this time. And it was a beautiful experience. But at some point, throughout the night, I looked at her. I'm like, man, I'm so proud of you, because she's been through so much trauma herself. And as a result of that, not only did she not play the victim, but she's become a master healer. So I kept looking at her and saying, I am so proud of you. I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. But what happened is this, it looped. And I thought I was talking to her, but at some point I was talking to myself, saying, I love you so much, and I'm so proud of you. And at first I was shocked. I'm like, wait a minute, I thought I'm talking to you. How did that happen? And she explained that to me the next day. She said, listen, all night long yesterday, you were, let's keep repeating. There's two facilitators, her and her significant other, who's also her partner. And I love both of them, and I'm really proud of both of them. Says, but the fact that you love me so much and you're so proud of me is really a reflection of how you feel on the inside. because, and I remember I also kept saying every fiber of my being, every fiber, and they were saying every fiber what? I'm like, every fiber is love, every fiber of my being. And I looked at, connecting with I said, the universe is so infinite and yet it's so intimate, right? Just a relationship with God. God can be so infinite and yet can be so intimate. That connectivity. So when somebody either criticizes you or puts you down or bully or whatever, get very clear that's really, this has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their inner world. And she said the same thing to me, that the fact that you love me, you're so proud of me, is a reflection of your inner world, Elia, because you are love and you are happy and you see the best in people. And I think this is a gift. I've seen the best in people for the last 35 years in my practice as a clinical psychologist and then as an executive coach. And I know it's a gift. I can see the best in somebody else before they see it in themselves. And part of the coaching, the facilitating, of course, is for them to eventually not only see it, but embrace it and live up to that potential, right? And it's a beautiful thing, to be on the front lines right here on this chair with the couch behind me and all that, and to be in the front row and watch people transform. I play my part, but the majority of the work is done. They do their own work, like it has to be. We all have to do our own work, right? But it's beautiful to see people living up to their potential. And when you do that and you align with your purpose in life, that's a happy person. And it's effortless. That doesn't even take work. Once you get to that stage, it's like, yep. And then you just continue to maintain your self-care, continue to practice self-forgiveness, which I think is a huge part of happiness, by the way. For forgiveness in general, but self-forgiveness even more important. And in my experience, and as a psychologist too, is like most people really struggle with that, unfortunately. They have trouble forgiving others, and they certainly have trouble forgiving themselves.
Absolutely.
But
If you
what I
can't
did,
forgive yourself, you can't forgive others, right?
exactly. So self-forgiveness is vital. And for some reason, this comes easy to me. My wife is like, nothing seems to, like, yeah, I forgive myself, especially as a recovering perfectionist, much easier now than it was before. Like, yeah, so what? I mean, it's not the end of the world. Very few things are the end of the world, honestly. Really.
Well, that's perfect considering how we started the whole conversation, and I couldn't get any words actually out of my mouth this morning and choking on them. It's really how we started the show today, where that whole concept of perfection. And I love how all of this keeps coming back, Dr. Elia, that it's self-care, self-forgiveness. It's becoming, and we've talked about this on many shows in the past. I encourage people to go back and look at all of our February shows on love, because in all of those shows, it comes back to that concept of self-love, but not just standing in front of the mirror saying, I am, perfect, I am beautiful, I am love, all of those. It's actually understanding that the love and happiness comes through us. It's an expression of us versus a self-affirmation of trying to convince myself that I love myself. Instead, and I hear this in you, is that this happiness is something that comes through us. We're not bringing it in from the outside. We're not going and grabbing it at the mall. We're not going and, expecting it to come from other people, but this is now an experience that's coming through us. Can you just talk on that? And I know Dr. Roshanek has another question too, but I just heard this in you, and I'm putting all the pieces together with love and happiness and all of it.
First of all, self-forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-compassion, if you think about it, right? Gandhi said that forgiveness is the attribute of the strong. I will also add to that happiness equals freedom. If I withhold forgiveness either from myself or somebody else, I'm not a free person. I'm sorry. I'm trapped. When I forgive, it equals freedom. A lot of people misconstrue happiness that it's when certain things take place. The when. And this is when we go back, the message, do not procrastinate your happiness. Forget all the whens. But the whens are constant for people. When I have enough money, when I have enough time, when I'm in the right relationship, when my kids grow up, when I'm in a when I retire, when. Right? It's nonstop. The whens are nonstop. None of the whens matter.
I think I may have said this before once on the show, but I'm a huge fan of that. I remember years ago, I was talking to my younger brother, and this came up, and he said, well, he was putting everything off until when he was done with his residency. And I was like, no, 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 no. You can't wait until when, because if you wait until when, every when becomes a moving target for the next when. And so
Exactly.
you are procrastinating living fully your life, your joy, your experiences, whatever, because as you start to approach a when goal, then you move that goalpost to the next when, because you're always expecting that when you arrive somewhere, there will be this magical set of circumstances where everything is perfect. And now you can be happy,
Yeah, because what happens after his residency?
right? There was, oh, yeah, there's always more. Life is
No,
always throwing something at
of
us,
course. And what happens after that? And what happens after that?
right?
It's elusive, and it's like a dog chasing its tail. So for me, happiness is right here, right now, being in the moment, and that's something that I traditionally have had struggled with until my transformation. I guess in the last few years, I used to live in the future a lot, but in a happy way, not necessarily like, oh, when I get there, I used to kind of fantasize in some ways, just have all these dream scenarios or whatever. And I have a little bit of ADD. I never thought I could be in the present, but having discovered that being in the present is magical, and it's new for me. It's like really the last 2 or 3 years, like being in the present. I'm right here with the two of you right now. I'm not thinking about what's happening, when the call is over or right here, fully present, fully engaged. And when that happens, at least for me, I feel fully alive. And when you feel fully alive, you're happier, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you are present,
Mhm.
it's the time traveling, I call it, right? You either go back to the past and you're regretful and sad or upset. You go to the future, you worry, um, you have anxiety, or you have this fantasy. And when you get there, like the when of the, let's say, residency, then that fantasy is not matched with the reality. And that mismatch causes suffering
Right.
because you think somehow you've been cheated, this is wrong, what do I do now? There's a plethora of different reactions, and none of them is, yay, this is not what I expected. None of them, right? So I have a question for you now, Dr. Elia. As we talk about all these different modes of being, and you are a psychologist, I want to talk about archetypes
Okay.
and this idea of how we do respond. Let's say I get to the future and more things have happened than I expected since I thought I was going to get there. And now I have setbacks. And so people tend to go, and we talked about this earlier a little bit, into that victim mode, right?
Yes.
When setbacks occur, or we think we lost, or so on and so forth. And so there are several archetypal behaviors, personas that we
Yes.
can embody or express, and they include the victim or the critic and so on. We get overwhelmed, we can with fear, or we freeze. But then there's another one that really serves us well, the navigator. Can you please speak to the role of the navigator and how embracing that role is a gateway to happiness for us?
Absolutely. But it's really important for our audience to understand that the four archetypes, or personality types that you just described, which is the victim, poor me, why is this happening to me? The critic who blames everybody else and never takes any personal responsibility, by the way. They
Of
just
course
keep
not.
blaming everybody.
I had nothing to do with this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the
They're
thing,
just
the
blame,
victim.
blame, blame, blame. They get frustrated and angry, and they're like, their face turns red. And of course, the fearful one, which, mind you, a decent human being who just basically so overwhelmed by the challenges or crises that they're facing, so they really don't know what to do. It's the deer with the headlights look. They're frozen in fear. And then we have the navigator. The thing is that all four of those types exist within each human being.
Sure.
So it's not like, well, Jacqueline, you're the navigator, and Dr. Russell, you're the navigator, and it's not like that. We all have it. So what's really important for people to understand is, like, if you're going to be a victim, do it for half an hour, not for half a decade or 50 years. No, I'm serious. There are
Sure.
people who stay in victim mode forever.
It sounds funny, but
No, it's not funny
we're
though.
doing
Exactly.
it.
It's
We're
terrible.
doing it.
Yeah. Or there are people that will blame the government, their spouse, their boss, their what. They're always into blaming
Their
all,
whole lives, it's
and they
always
stay that way,
circumstantial. Yeah.
miserable, angry, and frustrated. So if you're going to get mad for a little bit. Okay, that's human nature. It happens. But then pivot and switch over to navigation mode. And I'll give you a personal example, which I did all 4 of those within within one week. In March of 2020, when the pandemic first hit, all my speaking engagements all over the world got canceled in 1 week. Email after email after, sorry to inform you, sir, conference has been, canceled, postponed, and so on. Well, initially, I had the deer with the headlights. Look like, holy, what am I going to do now? Like, I was frozen in fear, didn't know what to do. This never happened before. It's not like I had experience with pandemics. And I was mad. Sometimes the government or the severe lockdowns or whatever. I wanted to travel. I wanted to do this. I don't like, wearing masks. I don't like being told what to do, basically. I don't like to be controlled. So I got mad. But had I stayed mad for the length of the entire pandemic, who would I have hurt? Them or myself? So feel it, but do it for half an hour, not for the rest of your life, not for 6 years, not for 6 months, not for 6 days even. I wouldn't even do it for 6 hours. But let's say half an hour, and then in the victim mode specifically, remember, why is this happening? Why is this happening to me versus why is this happening for me is a game changer. You immediately snap out of victim mode. So what did I do? I pivoted, and actually I wrote a book. I had no plans to write a book that year. My life was full. I had no plans to travel, to go to Greece. I had no plans to do any of that stuff and self-reflect and, really transform my life. That was a blessing in disguise. Navigators, number 1, practice massive self-care, and that's a non-negotiable. They don't negotiate self-care. That's a given. And not once in a blue moon, every single day, they put the self-care first. Navigators, for the most part, have a very positive attitude. In other words, they feel like this too shall pass, like everything does pass. Even the pandemic passed. Eventually, was it uncomfortable? Was it difficult? Did it, upset our lives? Of course, but it did pass, right? So the navigators have a big picture perspective. This too shall pass. Navigators also take action. Because if you think about it, in life, it doesn't matter what we know. What matters is what do we do with what we know? Don't we all know this is our temple, the only body I'm going to get, our temple, right? To feed it properly, to feed healthy food, to get a restful sleep every night, to do moderate exercise. Don't we all know that? But how many of us are doing it on a daily basis? And I say this because, as you know, the most common New Year's resolutions across the globe are 2. I want to lose some weight. I want to get in shape. And this happens year after year after year after year, which means knowing is not enough unless we actually do something about it. So navigators are doers. And it's beautiful that they're doers, right? And the other thing is that the navigators tend to listen, what I called, and we talked about this before, listen with your heart, listen with that third ear. Whether it's the voice of God, the Holy Spirit, your intuition, your higher self, whatever you call that voice, they listen to it, which means they have to get quiet. And not only do they listen to it, but then they move into action as a result of what they get. And I have learned over the last 35 years to really trust that voice. When I was younger, I'm not a perfect man. I sometimes I hear it. I used to hear it and I would ignore it. And guess what happens when you ignore your intuition or your voice? Things don't go very well in your life. But now, not only do I hear it and act on it, I used to ask questions like, well, why should I do that? Just kind of curiosity, the psychology mind of me. I didn't even ask questions anymore. And I want to share an experience with you that happened recently about that. So it was around Christmas time, just 3 months ago, here in Denver. It was a cold day, and I was driving in kind of an industrial part of town. And when you get to an intersection or about to enter the freeway or exit, there's usually somebody sitting in the median with the sign, right? Help me, please, homeless person, and so on. And my wife, who's a sweetheart, she's always like loaded up all our cars with stacks of dollar bills. So when that happens, we can easily well, for some reason, mine was empty. I guess I didn't have any more. I only had like a 20 in my pocket. And I don't carry a lot of cash anyways. And I came to this intersection. I was going to turn left, and there was a guy with a sign, but his energy, I mean, frazzled hair, scraggly beard, very kind of what I perceive to be an angry energy, and just like, and it just didn't feel right. So my car, I went past him, was still at a red light, and I'm like, you know what? And he was standing a little bit behind me. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I'm like, I'm just going to I'm going to find somebody else, some other homeless person to give this to. And I kid you not, this voice, the spirit said to me, Elia, you need to give this to this man. And at first I was like, I really don't want to, because he kind of scares me. I mean, he was a scary looking guy, right? But then the voice said one more word, now, meaning before their light turned red. So I've learned to obey, to kind of listen to that. So I lowered my window and I said, sir, he looking back, and he came running. And and I handed him what I had, which was a 20. And you know what happened as a result of that? He looked at me, his whole face softened up and made eye contact. And he said, thank you so much, sir. I really needed this today. And almost started to cry. And then and I said, you're welcome. The light turns green and I take off. And then I started getting so overwhelmed emotionally. And I had like tears running down my eyes. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening to me. But it was a connection with a complete stranger that scared me initially. But then I'm just really glad that I just listened to that, that still small voice from above, and actually corrected my own judgment, if you will, right? And I had a connection with a complete stranger just for 10 seconds. But, with kindness, the funny thing is that everybody wins. It's not only the receiver that wins, the giver wins as well. Because I felt in my heart just melted. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? Don't judge anybody by the way they look, even though they're scary. I'm so glad that I listened to, because had I not listened to it, I know this wouldn't be a story. And I didn't, you know what I mean? It was with this beautiful moment with two souls that will never cross paths ever again in this lifetime, most likely.
It was so moving, honestly. Like, I had the goosebumps everywhere, and I also started to tear up. So there's definitely a power in what your experience that you shared with us, and I'm grateful that you did that. That was really
Yeah,
beautiful.
listen and act. It's not enough to listen, because initially I wasn't going to act, and then it said now, meaning before the light turns, and you have to take off, and that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah. We have our friend Glenn that always talks about the whisper.
There was
Um, yeah, and he tells this great story about how he'd really learned to listen to that. And long story short, because we're over time already,
oh sorry. Yeah.
but he had no,
No,
it's
no.
not you. We could keep going,
Oh, no
but
worries.
he ended up in the middle, in the mountains, in a sort of a pileup, and he had just hit another car who or was just before that car, not hit it, but just stopped before it. And the voice said to him, "Get out." And his son was with him. And he said to his son, "Get out." And of course, his son had also learned not to question. They both jumped out, and a truck hit them from behind.
Mm.
And that it's a great story. But the thing is that there's something called our gut that tells us. And I always separate that from inspiration, because science has shown us that your gut can be as often wrong as it is right. And we see this with politicians and influencers and celebrities. And we think, what made them think this was a good idea? But
Yeah.
that's different than the inspiration, that whispered, that there's no scientific basis for. You cannot say that there's some kind of computation or processing occurring that tells you to do something like that, because you couldn't know. That's the inspiration. That's that whisper. And we don't question that whisper. Guts, sure, question them all day long, because they can lead you to bad decisions. But that inspiration, that's divine.
I love that you brought that up, because that was exactly what I was just going to say. As people, we hear that thing where it's, go looking for your purpose, right? And I love that it's wait for the inspiration to come, because that's where you take your action from, right? The minute we go looking for happiness, we go looking for our purpose, we go looking for the meaning of life, when if we just wait for that inspiration, that whisper, that voice to come in, and then we start taking action from that inspiration. I think probably all three of us here, because we all have, I'm going to say our own businesses. I have a charity, Access to the Path, all the work that you do, Dr. Elia, your books, everything. I know all of that was inspiration that has come through us. And now we've just gone out into the world and taken action. And I think that's literally everybody's purpose here. I don't care if you're a baker, you're a singer, you're a soccer coach, you're whatever that is. But when we feel that inspiration come through us as a whisper, a voice, whatever you want to call it, that's when that action is the beautiful experience of being a human being, right? And that's when we feel like, if everybody just took a moment who was here today, and a moment where you felt inspired to go out and do something and it felt so good, that's what you've been talking about with the happiness, right? That's and then moving into that state of joy, right? Because now you're coming from a place that's greater than ourself. We've turned on our body. It's all working for us, all the chemicals and the reactions and everything. And it's like we're all of a sudden we're in sync. It's our heart working with our bodies, working with our brains, and you're in that state of flow. And isn't that really that state of happiness and joy that we're all, everyone says, what's everybody looking for? Well, I just want to be happy, right? I just want to be happy. And all these components you're giving us today, to me, are just putting us right on our own path, because you can't tell us one thing. Dr. Roshanak can't tell us how to get there. I can't tell you how to get there, but all these put us on our own journey and our own path to discover that for ourselves.
I can give access to that path.
I hate lots of access. And we're going to talk about that right now. We're not going to give access, but I'm going to put you on the spot, Dr. Elia, because our show is now, I know the three of us could sit here and talk about this literally all day.
Of course.
But we always have our last moment with our guests, and it's our get off the couch moment, because what we really want people to do is exactly what you were talking about today. Go take some action for their own happiness. And so if there was one thing you were going to leave with people today, that one get off the couch moment, what's that one thing people could do starting today to create happiness for themselves? Get your booty off the couch and go create some happiness for yourself.
Make some action
what would
right
you
now.
say?
Now.
What would that be?
To make you happy.
The thing is that it's not one thing. There's a myriad of things people can do to get off the couch, both the physical couch and the symbolic couch, like getting outside of our comfort zone, right? So the call to action is think and act like a navigator. Even if you feel like a victim, even if you want to criticize, get mad from time to time, or you're frozen in fear from, as it happens to all of us from at one point or another in our lives, remember that you have a choice. You don't have to stay stuck there for the rest of your life, or even for the rest of the day. Navigate. And we gave you plenty of examples of what navigators do and what it looks like. Pick something. It doesn't matter what it is. Gratitude, forgiveness, physical exercise,
music,
prayer, meditation,
connection, right?
Yeah.
You said a lot about connecting with others today, which I think is a huge one too.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, like everybody that's in this room today, like you brought that connection point for us even, right? And we got to have that moment of time where we're all connected together as well.
And one last thing, I will tell you this. In my life, and this is my going back for decades, anytime that I've really felt down, and it doesn't happen very often with me, because that's my disposition is on the happier side. But if I felt down, one of the quickest ways for me to get outside of myself is to go and perform an act of service or kindness to somebody else.
Right?
Because no matter how
I'm all over that one.
Yeah, and you know why? Because no matter how down I am, I can promise you there's somebody else worse off than me, even when I'm as down as I can be. All you got to do is look around and go and do an act of service, and I promise you, your whole mood, your whole life your day will change as a result of that. My day changed as a result of this one man. Like, I was not the same person when I went through the green light afterwards. For what? For a 10-second connection with a complete stranger who gave me the gift by saying, I really needed that today. I mean, I can't even talk about it.
And Neil Donald Walsh, who obviously is one of the founders here of Humanity's Team, in our room that we do still on Clubhouse every Tuesdays. And Dr. Elia, you've been there with us. Wednesdays.
We're on Tuesdays.
I know. Today's Thursday. I know.
We're on Tuesdays. And then we do it with Neil on
Wednesdays at Clubhouse. But the final thing that he closed with, and he talks about this often, but sometimes he just says things in a different way that hit me. And his final words to us in the room yesterday is he said, "Thank you for allowing me to be here with you all today, because when I get to stand with all of you, I get to be the highest, truest expression of who I am."
Right.
And I want to thank you for that, because you've given us that gift today. I've seen it in you today. And thank you for our audience for also allowing us to be and coming with us on this journey today, because that's given us all such a beautiful moment of time of happiness, because it's allowed us to be our true selves. So that's, go out and find that. If you're going to find something, find that moment of time for yourself today. Go be your true self. And that happiness button's just going like, it's like flowing through me now.
Socrates said, to go back to that very beginning of know thyself, we don't have anything directly from Socrates that's written, but through Plato, that an unexamined life is not worth living. So having that self-reflection and getting to know who you are, that itself can be a joyful journey if you're doing it lovingly, not to find something wrong with yourself, not to criticize yourself. But if whatever decision we make, we decide, is it coming from fear or is it coming from love? When I flub a line, am I in myself in that state of love so I can laugh it off and share that joy together with whomever is, across from me, as it were? Or am I in that state of fear and I'm also sharing that energy? And we know we feel that energy from each other. We already discussed that.
And I would say, however you get your answers, whether it's through prayer or meditation or practicing mindfulness, get curious about. Not judgmental. Get curious. Ask more questions. Ask more feedback from people that you trust. Like, I trust you both implicitly. If I needed something, I would bounce things out. I need some feedback. What do you guys think? Being open. You know what they say about the mind? It's like a parachute. It only works when it's open, right? So,
same with your heart, right? Same with your heart. If your heart's closed, you can't be open to all that's possible, right?
Exactly. And I'm so grateful
all the love
for hours and hours and hours. And you helped me be my better self just by being in your presence. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste. Namaste.
Dr. Roshnak, before we go, do you want to talk about next week's show? Because we have a little unusual show next week.
We do. Next week, Jacqueline and I are getting down and dirty with happiness. Right. So it is the last show of our Increasing Happiness series. And
we realize we're both kind of happiness experts too. So we're like, let's just hash out some happiness next week.
Right. So we're like, let's us have that conversation and bring forth some of the things that we'd like to share from our experiences and our knowledge and our embodied wisdom. And so we're speaking to the essence of happiness next week, Tuesday, March 26th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and 4 p.m. right now, as it will still be GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. And so some parts of the world have changed. In Central Europe, they're not.
I'm so confused now.
Yeah. So, but those who are in that time zone now. So, or you could just check us out on the Humanities Team live event schedule. And we have our own playlist on YouTube if you've missed any of our conversations, or if you'd like to go back and hear some more of this one. And last week, we actually had Dr. Stephen Post, who is the world's expert on the science of giving and altruism and how we benefit from it. We've had amazing guests speak to happiness all week, and we'll just sort of round that out next week with Jacqueline and I as our featured guests, our Jacqueline Way and Dr. Roshnak Hashimoon. Join us.
Look out. We're going rogue.
We're going full rogue. This was just a preview.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Elia, so much.
And thank you, Dr. Elia, for joining us.
Dr. Elia, can you please tell us, where everybody can find you? Because you're
like
all
Dr. Elia Gourgouris.com for starters.
Yeah, my website, that's one. And then I would say LinkedIn, that would be,
Yeah, we had that up earlier.
LinkedIn. I think those
and
are
Facebook.
The best. Facebook too, but Facebook. LinkedIn, Facebook, and I'm on Instagram, but not that much. So yeah.
Go find him. Follow him, chase him down. Go learn from all of his wisdom.
Would love
go
to
read his books.
Yeah, would love to connect with all of you there.
There's there's the LinkedIn. So there's dreliagourgouris.com and also linkedin.com.
Yes.
I have loved my hour. I've loved it. It was like, I can't believe we're an hour and 15 minutes into. We could talk for like 4 hours. It would never I would never get bored.
Well, don't worry, because when your next book comes out, we'll just do this all over again. We know it's coming down the
Yeah.
road. So
Okay.
we know it's coming. So thank you so
All right.
much, my
You
friend,
bet.
for being with us. What an honor. You know, you and I have known each other for a long time now. And I've been on your show. Now you've been on my show. Like it's like beautiful full circle moment for me. And I just loved it. So thank you, my friend, for sharing your wisdom. You know, Dr. Happiness is absolutely and should be your name because it just glows off of you. And we appreciate you taking your time out of your life this busy week. I mean, I can't tell you how many podcasts and interviews he has, especially this week with it being World
Oh my
Happiness Week.
goodness.
Thank you. Yeah.
But you know
it's
what?
been,
We're all
a
in
gift.
such an alignment of our hearts and our spirits. That's why it's effortless,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's when you know you're in
Absolutely.
the flow, and when you're in the flow, it is beautiful. So,
It is.
yeah, indeed.
Thank
And
you.
one of
And
the
namaste.
greatest
Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
You bet.
God
Same
bless.
time.
God bless you.
No, not
Love
same
you
time.
both.
See you next week. See you next
See
Tuesday.
you next week on Tuesday. Bye.
Bye.